other work done up to this point, up to today. But I got back onto the video. I'm trying to do this is the last 11 years of Seed kind of thing.
Yeah.
Revisiting everything that it took to get here has been very exciting for me. But the video is getting longer and longer, so I figure, okay, now I'm going to have to just release it as 2 parts. I'll do like here's part 1 is the last 11 years, and part 2 is okay, what happened with the South African studio, and so the second one will be a shorter video, and at the end of it, I will show the 8-minute teaser that we finished. So
nice. Yeah, I think people will really dig that, and it will give them, an idea as to what to expect. But that's awesome. So the 2 parts, how long are each of those?
Well, part 1 will be 2 hours, and part 2 will be probably just under an hour.
Wow. So really a lot of in-depth information as to the coming together. That's great, man. The whole background on all of what has led up.
I don't know that anybody else will care about it as much as, if nothing else, I'm doing it sort of as an autobiography of the show. But it's been fun for me to go through the last 11 years worth of archives and remembering events and things. What was pretty cool, though, it has really kind of served as a skeletal outline for me, is I was interviewed on Jessica's show on Crossing Over.
Yeah.
And that was like a 3-hour and change show. And I basically told her the story.
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of that I could draw from and use as kind of a basis. But instead of just me talking, I'm putting all the visuals with it, the things that I experienced that I was talking about. I either had photographs of it or video footage of it. So, embellishing the descriptions, obviously.
Yeah. Well, so that's cool that you had that interview to pull from and kind of guide you in that as well, in telling the story. Are you including that with the documentary or no?
Yeah, I decided, well, at first I was just going to kind of paraphrase and redo, but I had so much passionate zeal and excitement when I was talking with her, and I listened to my re-recording of it as just like a narrative, and it didn't have the same energy and excitement, I thought, as the one that I did with Jessica. So it's a little of both, because
awesome. Yeah.
We get talking like that, and the host will ask questions or kind of derail my train of thought, and we start rabbit trailing on a million directions, and I try to find my way back again. And I'm very much a linear type of person, so as I was listening to it myself, I was getting frustrated. I'm like, oh God, I'm jumping all over the timeline here. I want to tell the story from 2009 to today in a linear progression, So it's been good. And it's crazy, man. And it brought me to tears a few times, just remembering how Yahuwah had provided for us in these crazy ways on several more than a few occasions over the years. And every time I get 100% focused on this project, all of a sudden emails and phone calls start coming in from people out of the blue that want to help out. And I just had one this afternoon. As a matter of fact, this guy in Florida called me. It could be really potentially good. I hesitate to say too much until things actually come to fruition, but
yeah, right.
It's exciting.
Well, it's beautiful. Yeah, that it works out that way, and that new windows of opportunity and always seem to open up at the right time. But I do think that you've got a lot of people that really love your work, love what you do, and love you as far as as a leader of alternative truth. And so I think a lot of people will really appreciate the background story and that you took the time to put it together. So yeah, I think it'll be worthwhile, all of your efforts.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. I'm enjoying it either way.
Yeah, exactly. If anything, you've done it for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, looking back over the last 11 years, really coming out of nowhere on this as far as social media goes. I mean, it's like when you started out. Did you get your start on Blog Talk also? I think you did.
Yes, right.
Yeah. From Blog Talk days to now TFR to, of course, YouTube and Facebook. Yeah, it's a long journey, but I mean, if you're passionate about it, whatever it is, whatever you're doing,
right.
Get out there, and eventually you find yourself, you get an audience, and the audience begins to grow, and growing from 0 to over 200,000.
Yeah, I remember the days of talking to myself.
Talking to yourself like nobody's listening
to
this radio show.
Yeah. But you got to start somewhere, and I think Blog Talk was a platform that gave a lot of us at least the tool and a platform, by which to begin sharing anyways. And so, and then all of a sudden, you have people trickling in, and also a lot of people, different people were supporting each other, inviting each other to come on to their different shows. And so it was an interesting time when all that was starting to develop.
Yeah. So I don't think I've ever heard your story. How did it, as far as getting started on Blog Talk and radio in general, what was it that made you decide to do it, and how did you actually start your program?
Greg Messina and Byron LeBeau, they had a show on Blog Talk, and they invited me to be a guest in 2006. And so I came on to their show, and they really liked, the information that I was providing. And so they kept inviting me back, and I got kind of used to doing radio. And then other people also started to invite me as guests. And then I just decided to utilize the platform to begin my own show, and speaking basically to myself for a little while until audience developed. But and back then too, Blog Talk was giving us a platform to also share a lot of what was kept out of the mainstream, and a lot of topics that were hush hush, and especially when it came to Christianity and alternative viewpoints. A lot of information about the Nephilim and the giants, the whole Genesis 6, that was a big topic at that time, and one of great interest. A lot of people were speaking about it from different perspectives. I think there was still, relatively few Christian voices or perspective that was tackling the issues in the manner that you and I do. Whole lot of New Age, and I thought, we should balance out all of that was being provided at that time.
So wow, you got started in 2006. I didn't realize it goes that far back.
Well, no, not with my own show. As a guest, yes, 2006. But I actually started in 2008.
Oh, wow.
In November of 2008 is when I actually launched Fallen Angels TV on Blog Talk. And people can actually go. The archives are still, there's a lot of shows there from the old days.
Yeah, I did over 200 shows, I think, before coming over here to TFR, which was cool because TFR, of course, also, not only do we have the internet presence on TFR, but they also broadcast on some FM stations.
Yes.
As well, which, big thanks to Chris Gio and the crew that have put this together and allowed us to come on, because it certainly opened up a bigger audience. But it was crazy for me is, I've always been a late nighter, and my show has always been in the 10 or 11 p.m. time slot. And because of that, I ended up getting the biggest part of my audience was from the other side of the world. It was like South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, because I guess for them, I was like their morning cup of tea or something, let's go listen to some fringe freak, before we start or whatever, because it was late here, but early, in the morning there.
Right.
So this is what was jumping out at me as I was doing the making of the seed thing is, I had just published my first book, Babylon Rising, in January of 2012. And one of the first responses I got was from a guy in South Africa. I guess he had heard my radio show or something, and when he read the book. And in the book, I said, hey, if you'd like me to speak, here's my information. I'd love to come and present this information. And, next thing you know, I get this call to speak in South Africa. And, man, it was just crazy how all that worked out. But, my Blog Talk, I think my archives are still up there, but I don't think they're accessible because I canceled my account. I might reinstate my account just to get everything because I had a good 200 and something shows on there.
You should check because I don't have an active account there either, and haven't for a while. But
really,
I know the archives are still.
Them. Maybe you can listen to them, but you just can't download them, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think you may be even able to download them, but I'm not positive. I haven't checked in a while. Yeah. Oh, really? So you actually attempted?
Yeah, it was a while back. I was attempting to archive everything, back when the Great Purge was happening.
Right.
Too long gone on various platforms. I was like, oh boy, I want to make sure I get everything I can get. This is a lot of work, and
yeah, it is.
I've talked about it before, but selfishly, my first couple of shows were I had just got introduced to Torah. In the way that I understand it now. Of course, I've always Genesis and everything, but I'd spent all those years prior. You're right, from 2006 to 2009, or maybe even a little earlier than 2006. But in that latter part of the first decade of the century, the Nephilim was a huge topic, and Steve and Tom Horn were out there doing all kinds of stuff, and L.A. Marzulli and others. And, these are all guys that I was spending a lot of time listening to and reading and stuff like that. But, I'd spent a lot of time in the Torah, but for me, it was always, I'm looking for Nephilim and Nimrod and that kind of stuff. And I go to this Torah study. It was the day after Black Friday. It was the Saturday after Black Friday, 2009. And man, wow, it was the portion where Joseph is sold into slavery. And the leaders asked us to take a piece of paper, draw a line on the center, and on the left, write down Joseph, and on the right, Yeshua or Jesus. And he said, just come up with, the story of both of these people. So write down as many parallels as you can think of between the life of Joseph and the life of Yeshua. Never thought about that a day in my life. I was some similarities, but I never really intentionally sat down and, consciously thought about it till then. And I came up with 25 parallels just off the top of my head, and everybody else, of course, we had a lot of crossover, but some had insights that I didn't have and vice versa. And all said and done, we had like 50 parallels by the time we were done sharing. And I was like, wow. And the question came up, was Tamar a Canaanite? And I'm like, with all the Nephilim research I've been doing, I'm like, no way. There's no way Tamar was a Canaanite in the line of Yeshua. And half the class thought that she was, because the mother, Judah married a Canaanite. And he has these 3 children. And he wants to marry, the oldest off to Tamar, and of course, first 2 die, and he holds the third son back, and the story. And half the class is thinking, yeah, she's got to be a Canaanite, and I'm like, no way. So I got home, and that's what made me crack open Josher, because I was searching everything. Like I was like, I got to figure this out, And when I finally came across in the story in the Joshua account, it came right out and said that she was of the house of Shem. I was like, oh, and I couldn't wait that class and start talking about it.
Yeah, right.
But the thing was, I'd spent my entire life in standard Christian Baptist upbringing type of church services. One guy at the front talking for like an hour, and the rest listening. But in this house church setting where everybody's allowed to share, I learned more like in that first year than in 40 plus years prior. And I was like, I need to get this out to the world. So those were first 2 shows were getting back to basics. And then after that, I was like, hey, wait a minute. Steve Quayle, Tom Horn, L.A. Marzulli, all these, they're all really busy. And now I understand, you try to reach you, and people who try to get a hold of me, it's a difficult thing. So I get it now. But I'm like, they all got books. So if I tell them I have a radio show, I mean, every self-published author wants to promote his book. So I could get them on my show, and then I could talk to them for 2 hours. I couldn't call them up out of the blue and talk on the phone for 2 hours, but I could get them on my radio show and talk for 2 hours. And I listened to some of those early shows, and it's so green behind the ears. The
learning process.
I did all the talking most of the time. I'm like blah 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 blah. I listen to it now. I'm like, shut up, let the guest talk.
Right. We learned through all of that, but that was another awesome thing about having a show, is being able to invite guests and have people actually being willing to come on to promote their stuff, and having that opportunity to speak to them about just whatever topic and covering their story. And a lot of times they were appreciative to be able to share and promote and reveal the backdrop of their story. So that was a very cool and exciting aspect of beginning a show and having a show supported. Unfortunately for me, I published a book, Lucifer, Father of Cain, which for whatever reason was very, very much opposed by a lot of the alternative truth leaders. For whatever reason, I didn't understand it, but a lot of them would not touch me with a 10-foot pole. And so I learned that quickly in the process, but still there were some, that were willing, but that was an awkward side of, learning about how that topic and issue was greatly hated, which again didn't make sense to me. But
I think, yes, there are hot button topics, but what I've come to learn, and I don't mean to badmouth anybody, but I have seen in the various popular circles that the popularity is what's important. It's so there's to a certain degree there's a company line that many of these people, they're just following the company line, and they don't like anybody stepping out of it. And I was as soon as I started putting some content out, I got noticed pretty quickly. And next thing I was doing these huge conferences and stuff like that, and rubbing shoulders with guys and sharing the stage with a lot of these guys, and everything was great and hunky dory. And then for me, my book was Babylon Rising, and and some of these ministries, they're all about Christmas and Easter. Like that's like Uber sales month. Those are the let's make all our money months. Christmas deal. And you turn to my chapter, it's like Satan loves Christmas. This whole chapter dedicated to slamming Christmas, and I'm not sure if it was just that. I think it was a combination of three things. I think it was coming hard against Christmas and Easter. That was a pretty big one. Coming out boldly that 9/11 was an inside job. First conference, and I did the presentation, and the audience loved it. I got like a standing ovation at the end of it. Huge audience, loved it. It was great. I get out in the lobby, and they got cameras on me and everything. They're like, how'd it go? I'm like, I think it went great. And like, they got me standing next to L.A. Marzulli, and like, we're going to do, where do you want to do a next conference? Dallas? Yeah, that'd be cool. And everything's wonderful. Everything's great. And I go back to my table, and this guy comes up to me, and he was really mad about the 9/11 stuff that I talked about. And he's looking at me. So you're one of them truthers, huh? And yes, sir. Because the alternative is to be a liar.
Right.
So I don't know. He might have been a major donor or something, but after that, all of a sudden, I started getting a cold shoulder from everybody.
Blacklisted.
And then, I was cold shouldered first, and then when Doug Hamp and I, of course, were doing Quest for Truth. Doug Hamp and I, and episode 17 is where I came out pretty hardcore against pre-trib rapture, and boom, kick to the curb. It's like
Cross the line.
Cross the line.
Yeah.
So, oh well. Hey, it's kind of, I'm reliving a lot of the stuff as I'm going through all this archive footage. But Father's always been faithful through it, and I was actually just thanking him for our relationship, you and I. There's a kindred spirit there, and I'm like, it's nice that there's a brother who is willing to take the same types of stands, maybe for different topics, whatever, and take the knocks and take the beating, but be cool even in our disagreements, which unfortunately there's not enough of that these days.
Yeah, it is unfortunate, and the way people, for whatever reason, if you have disagreements, they can't handle it like in an adult manner, to just have respectful conversation and to honor people for where they are, because everybody learns and changes and molds as far as belief, and certainly I have been, and as far as being controversial, but that's one thing I've always greatly respected about you, is that you were willing to hear and to learn and to entertain a topic, and to cover both sides of an issue before deciding on a matter, and not a lot of people are willing to do even that, and are condemning and judgmental without even giving you an opportunity to speak about why and how you learned, and why it is that you have a perspective on an issue which may be contrary to mainstream. And so and both of us, without a doubt, have been attacked, and as far as being attacked and opposed and ridiculed, condemned by a lot of people. So that's another thing that we share. But
yeah, there's misery takes comfort in numbers.
Right. Yeah.
I had a guy I mentioned earlier that called me today, and he was just going off on how much he really, really enjoyed the conference you put on last year.
Oh, right.
Yeah, he was like, man, that was incredible. He's like, he's like, I'm practically trying to pay people to just sit down and watch it. It's like you're trying to get the word out to people.
That's awesome. That's really awesome.
Good stuff.
Yeah, even with the topic of flat Earth, that's something that we both stood for on truth, because if you open-mindedly examine it, without a doubt, you have to conclude there's no curvature, and water will not adhere to a ball. And so, truth is truth, and you're either going to stand for it, or you're just going to toe the line. And unfortunately, a lot of people are willing to do that, and I'm not that way. I'm not going to stand for lies, and certainly not going to just take on a perspective which I know is wrong and contrary to truth, and especially opposed to the Most High's word, and what's revealed in the gospel. So,
well, and that's it. It's like, okay, you could disagree with me, but all I'm doing is showing you what the text says. I didn't write it.
Exactly. Yes.
I may write a book about it, but that's what it says.
Right.
Just tell me what it says. Why are you going crazy?
Right.
I don't get it.
Yeah, me neither. All right, we are at first break. We'll be right back, everyone.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com.
With commerce being monopolized by major corporations, we feel a responsibility to return to handmade goods and to support individuals in the community. Sacred Word Publishing wants to encourage truth seekers to support each other, and one of the best ways we can do that is through offering this centralized marketplace where everyone's homemade products can be easily accessed by our fellow members in the body of Christ. Would you be interested in offering your handcrafted items in our store? Email us at sacredwordpublishingllc@gmail.com. Support the truth-seeking community by going to www.swpmarket.com. Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures.
Are the stories in the Bible true?
What if I told you that there are hundreds of confirming witnesses,
which give intricate detail to the stories in the Bible?
Have you ever found yourself deep in the rabbit hole with questions that no one seemed to have the answers to? Check out swpcalendar.com to see when to join us next for our Ask Me Anything series with author and researcher Zen Garcia, as he sheds light on the mysteries which have us all searching together.
Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
All right, welcome back everybody for our second portion. It's been awesome reminiscing and looking back, on all as far as our radio careers and how all that came about. But if you are ready, we can enter into the text. And do you remember where we left off?
We did Genesis 35. We have to still catch up in Joshua and Jubilees, so there's a few chapters in both of those that will get us caught up. I can start with Joshua, I guess.
Sounds good.
Because it was the death of Rachel and the death of Isaac is where we left off in Genesis.
Yes.
So I can go over to Joshua 36 and start there. At that time, the Lord appeared unto Jacob, saying, Arise, go to Bethel, and remain there, and make there an altar to the Lord who appeared unto thee, who delivered thee from thy son and thy sons from affliction. And Jacob rose up with his sons and all belonging to him, and they went and came to Bethel according to the word of the Lord. And Jacob was 99 years old when he went up to Bethel, and Jacob and his sons and all the people that were with him remained in Bethel in Luz. And he there built an altar to the Lord, who appeared unto him, and Jacob and his sons remained in Bethel 6 months. At that time died Deborah, the daughter of Uz, the nurse of Rebekah, who had been with Jacob, and Jacob buried her beneath Bethel under an oak that was there. And Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the mother of Jacob, also died at that time in Hebron. The same is Kiriath Arba, and she was buried in the cave of Machpelah, which Abraham had bought from the children of Heth. And the life of Rebekah was 133 years, and she died. And when Jacob heard that his mother Rebekah had died, he wept bitterly for his mother, and made a great mourning for her, and for Deborah, her nurse, beneath the oak. And he called the name of the place Alon Bakuth. And Laban the Syrian died in those days, for God smote him because he had transgressed the covenant that existed between him and Jacob. And Jacob was 100 years old when the Lord appeared unto him and blessed him and called his name Israel. And Rachel, the wife of Jacob, conceived in those days. And at that time, Jacob and all belonging to him journeyed from Bethel to go to his father's house to Hebron. And whilst they were going on the road, and there was yet but a little way to come to Ephrath, Rachel bare a son, and she had hard labor, and she died. And Jacob buried her in the way to Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. And he set a pillar upon her grave, which is there unto this day. And the days of Rachel were 45 years, and she died. Wow, she didn't live very long at all. 45 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's like spring chicken for these people.
Right.
That's like a third of the typical lifespan. Jacob called the name of his son that was born to him, which Rachel bare unto him, Benjamin, for he was born to him in the land on the right hand. And it was after the death of Rachel that Jacob pitched his tent in the tent of her handmaid Bilhah. And Reuben was jealous for his mother Leah on account of this, and he was filled with anger, and he rose up in his anger and went and entered the tent of Bilhah, and he thence removed his father's bed. At that time, the portion of birthright, together with the kingly and priestly offices, was removed from the sons of Reuben, for he had profaned his father's bed, and birthright was given unto Joseph, the kingly office to Judah, and priesthood to Levi, because Reuben had defiled his father's bed. Wow, this is the first time I ever saw it. This is the disbanding of the Melchizedek order right here. I mean, I always knew that it ended with Jacob, but hadn't thought. I mean, sure enough, the Melchizedek order was supposed to always go to the firstborn, but never did. Yes. There was somebody always screwed up, and it never went to the first.
Right.
But wow, this powerful paragraph right there. Because it says, together with the kingly and priestly offices, that's the king priest, that's the Melchizedek,
right? Yes,
was moved from Reuben, and it says he threw his father's bed out. I think I always assumed that he got in there and started messing around with Bilhah, but at least so far in this text, it doesn't show that. It just, he was mad and he took his father's bed out of there, which is different. I mean, it's still a disrespectful thing, but it's not sleeping with his, mother's handmaid or whatever. Not as bad as I thought it was anyway.
According to this story.
According to this story.
And others.
Text probably goes. Okay. And these are the generations of Jacob who were born to him in Padan Aram, and the sons of Jacob were 12. The sons of Leah were Reuben the firstborn, and Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and their sister Dinah. And the sons of Rachel were Joseph and Benjamin. And the sons of Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, were Gad and Asher. And the sons of Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, were Dan and Naphtali. These are the sons of Jacob, which were born to him in Padan Aram. And Jacob and his sons and all belonging to him journeyed and came to Mamre, which is Kiriath Arba, that is in Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac sojourned. And Jacob and with his sons and all belonging to him dwelt with his father in Hebron. And his brother Esau and his sons and all belonging to him went to the land of Seir and dwelt there and had possessions in the land of Seir. And the children of Esau were fruitful and multiplied exceedingly in the land of Seir. And these are the generations of Esau that were born to him in the land of Canaan. And the sons of Esau were 5. And Ada bare to Esau his firstborn Eliphaz, and she also bare to him Reuel and Alibama bare to him Jeush, Yalam, and Korah. These are the children of Esau who were born to him in the land of Canaan. And the sons of Eliphaz, the sons of Esau, were Teman, Omar, Zepho, Gatam, Kenaz, and Amaleks. And the sons of Reuel were Nekhath, Zerach, Shema, and Mizah. And the sons of Jeush were Timnah, Alva, Jethath, and the sons of Yaalam were Elah, Phinor, and Kenaz. And the sons of Korah were Teman, Mibzar, Magdiel, and Aram. These are the families of the sons of Esau according to their dukedoms in the land of Seir. And these are the names of the sons of Seir, the Horite, inhabitants of the land of Seir: Lotan, Shobal, Zibeon, Anah, Dishan, Ezer, and Dishan, being 7 sons. And the children of Lotan were Hori, Heman right there. I have the power. Okay, I'm dating myself here. Heman and his sister Timnah. That is Timnah, who came to Jacob and his sons, and they would not give ear to her. And she went and became a concubine to Eliphaz, the son of Esau, and she bare to him Amalek. And the sons of Shobal are Alvan, Manahath, Ebal, Shepho, and Onam. And the sons of Zibeon were Ajah and Anah. This was that Anah who found the Yemen in the wilderness when he fled the asses of Zibeon his father. Must be a backstory to that one. And whilst
I wonder if it was that pillar, that had the writings of the Watchers on it.
What?
Where it speaks about
the. But he says something about the who found it, the Yemen in the wilderness.
Yeah, whatever the Yemen is. It may, I'm only speculating if it was that pillar in some manner.
Oh,
but who knows?
Who the Yamim? That'd be worth looking into. I want to make a little note of that.
Note of that, yeah.
Found the Yamim in the wilderness when he fled the asses of Zibeon his father. And whilst he was feeding his father's asses, he led them to the wilderness at different times to feed them. And there was a day, I guess it's going to tell us the story. Cool. And there was a day, and there was a day that he, what's funny about that? Sheila's so funny when we watch a movie or something together. I like to just let the movie play out and just watch it and, let the revelations come. She wants to know in advance everything. And so she'll be like, well, how come we did that? Or what's this? And I can literally count 30 seconds. 1, 1,000, 2, 3, and somebody on TV will explain whatever the question was. And it happens so often. It's crazy. It's a comic. So I won't even answer anymore because I know the answer is going to come.
Right.
On the show. So it's like here we are, Josh. Here I'm doing the same thing.
Yes.
Next paragraph it tells us.
Right. That's so funny.
All right. So, and there was a day that he brought them to one of the deserts on the seashore opposite the wilderness of the people. And whilst he was feeding them, behold, a very heavy storm came from the other side of the sea and rested upon the asses that were feeding there, and they all stood still. And afterward, about 120 great and terrible animals came out from the wilderness at the other side of the sea, and they all came to the place where the asses were, and they placed themselves there. And those animals, from their middle downward, were the shape of the children of men, and from the middle upward some had the likeness of bears. What? And some the
I remember this.
Kifas, and with tails behind them from between their shoulders reaching down to the earth like the tails of the Duchifath. I don't know what that is. And these animals came and mounted and rode upon the asses and led them away, and they went away unto this day. What? What? What
it's one of those hybrid creature type, like the story of Zepho killing that satyr.
Oh, in that case, from the waist down, it was the likeness of a goat, and the waist up was like a human. But this is saying,
this is awkward, really weird.
Yeah, this is from the middle down. The shape of the men. Oh, no, this is the opposite. Yeah, from the middle downward were the shape of the children of men, and from the middle upward, the likeness of bears and other weird creatures here. Duchipath. Duchipath? I don't know what that is. Do you know what that is?
No.
Duchipath. It's gone the way of the dodo bird. I don't know. This is crazy. What?
Right, yeah.
It's one of those that you go, huh? What is that? And one of these animals approached Ana and smote him with his tail, and then fled from that place. And when he saw this work, he was exceedingly afraid of his life, and he fled and escaped to the city. And he related to his sons and brothers all that had happened to him. And many men went to seek the asses, but could not find them. And Ana and his brothers went no more to that place from that day following, for they were greatly afraid of their lives. And the children, so these things are out just running around out there. They're just out and about.
Yeah, very bizarre.
You know, it's crazy about that. I'm collaborating with a good friend of mine from my Army days back in the 80s and 90s. We're working on a spin-off of Seed, because the first three, there's 3 teams to Seed, and 2 of them get wiped out in episode 3. And and so the remaining one, I was, and then my storyline in episode 4 jumps forward 8 years in time. So I was always like, what happens in the 8-year gap, you know? And so I've always had this idea of a split. What happened to Charlie team? Did Charlie get reassigned as the new A team? And what happened in those 8 years with them? And so I always had this idea of a spin-off series, but I didn't really want to helm it necessarily. You know, I was so busy with my timeline. So I thought, man, my friend Dave would be perfect for that. So, and we've been having these great brainstorm sessions on it. And I called him, and he just wrote the first script about 2 weeks ago. And I'm not going to spoil anything, but he's off to a really good direction, and he's dealing with scorpion men that are listed in the Epic of Gilgamesh. And it's the same kind of thing. I mean, in Epic of Gilgamesh, you've got these hybrid creatures that are just out and about in this time period.
Yeah, right.
You know? So you have this Sumerian text, and there are plenty of others. The Hittites had lots of carvings of hybrid creatures. The Egyptians did too. Everybody
Egyptians,
did.
Yes, everybody. Yeah.
So here we have a Hebrew text talking about it too.
Yes.
That's pretty crazy.
And remember we had done the shows on the Dogmen and all that,
right?
As well. The Lion Men of Moab and stuff like that. Yeah.
Man, what a time that must have been. I don't know that I'd want to live in that time, but I sure would like to, take a camera crew there and do a little documentary or something and come back. Okay. And the children of Ana, the son of Seir, were Dishon and his sister, Alibama. And the children of Dishon were Hemdan, Ishban, Ithran, and Chiran. And the children of Ezer were Bilhan, Zavan, and Akan. And the children of Dishon were Uz and Aaron. These are the families of the children of Seir, the Horite, according to their dukedoms in the land of Seir. And Esau and his children dwelt in the land of Seir, the Horite, the inhabitants of the land, and they had possessions in it, and were fruitful and multiplied exceedingly. And Jacob and his children and all belonging to him dwelt with their father Isaac in the land of Canaan, as the Lord had commanded Abraham their father. Horite, let me look that up real quick. If I'm not mistaken, that's they're troglodytes. I think Horite was cave dwellers, if memory serves. Horite, no. can't remember which one. Oh, no, yeah, it is. Yeah, troglodyte. Yeah, so these guys were cave dwellers. Esau went and hung out with troglodyte cave dwellers that had the land full of hybrids.
So bizarre.
How bizarre, how bizarre. How much time we have left? We got a few minutes. I can go over to Jubilees. Well, let me see. I already covered Rachel's death. I don't think Isaac has died yet here. I could read another chapter and see what happens.
Sure.
All right. And in the 150th year of the life of Jacob, that is the 9th year of Jacob's dwelling with his children in the land of Canaan, he came to Padan Aram. And in those days, Jacob journeyed with his children from Hebron, and they went and returned to the city of Shechem, they and all belonging to them, and they dwelt there, for the children of Jacob obtained good and fat pasture land for their cattle in the city of Shechem, the city of Shechem having then been rebuilt, and there were in it about 300 men and women. And Jacob and his children and all belonging to him dwelt in the part of the field which Jacob had bought from Hamor, the father of Shechem, when he came from Padan Aram, before Simeon and Levi had smitten the city. And all those kings of the Canaanites and Amorites that surrounded the city of Shechem heard that the sons of Jacob had again come to Shechem and dwelt there. And they said, shall the sons of Jacob, the Hebrew, again come to the city and dwell therein? After that they have smitten its inhabitants and driven them out. Shall they now return and also drive out those who are dwelling in the city, or slay them? And all the kings of Canaan again assembled, and they came together to make war with Jacob and his sons. I have a feeling this is going to cover the same territory where you were reading in the, I think it was Legend of the Jews, about the war with the Amorites and the Ninevites.
Ninevites, yeah.
And Jashub, king of, I think so. I think what you were reading was about Jashub, king of Tapnach.
Yes,
sent all to his neighboring kings, to Elon, king of Gaash, and to Ehuri, king of Shiloh, and to Parathon, king of Khazar, and to Susi, king of Sarton, and to Laban, king of Beth-Koran, and to Shebar, king of Othnaima. If I ever need to come up with some wacky names, man, this is the place to go.
Right.
Come up to me and assist me, and let us smite Jacob the Hebrew and his sons and all belonging to him, for they are again come to Shechem to possess it and to slay its inhabitants as before. And all these kings assembled together and came with all their camps, a people exceedingly plentiful, like the sand upon the seashore, and they were all opposite to Tapnach. And Jashub, king of Tapnach, went forth to them with all his army, and he camped there with them opposite to Tapnach without the city. And all these kings they divided into 7 divisions, being 7 camps against the sons of Jacob. And they sent the declaration to Jacob and to his sons, saying, come you all forth to us, that we may have an interview together in the plain, and revenge the cause of the men of Shechem, upon whom you slew in their city. And you will now again return to the city of Shechem and dwell therein, and slay its inhabitants as before. And the sons of Jacob heard this, and their anger was kindled exceedingly at the words of the kings of Canaan. And 10 of the sons of Jacob hastened and rose up, and each of them girt on his weapons of war. And there were 102 of their servants, and with them equipped in battle array. And all these men, the sons of Jacob, with their servants, went toward these kings, and Jacob their father was with them. And they all stood upon the heap of Shechem. And Jacob prayed to the Lord for his sons, and he prayed, and he spread forth his hands to the Lord, and said, O God, thou art an almighty God. Thou art our Father. Thou didst form us, and we are the works of thine hands. I pray thee, deliver my sons through thy mercy from the hand of their enemies, who are this day coming to fight. And with them save them from their hand. For in thy hand is power and might to save the few from the many. And give unto my sons, thy servants, strength of heart and might to fight with their enemies, to subdue them, and make their enemies fall before them. And let not my sons and their servants die through the hands of the children of Canaan. But if it seemeth good in thine eyes to take away the lives of my sons and their servants, take them in thy great mercy through the hands of thy ministers, that they may not perish this day by the hands of the kings of the Amorites. And when Jacob ceased praying to the Lord, the earth shook from its place, and the sun darkened, and all these kings were terrified, and a great consternation seized them. And the Lord hearkened to the prayer of Jacob, and the Lord impressed the hearts of all the kings and their hosts with the terror and awe of the sons of Jacob. For the Lord caused them to hear the voice of chariots and the voice of mighty horses from the sons of Jacob, and the voice of a great army accompanying them. And these kings were seized with great terror at the sons of Jacob. And whilst they were standing in their quarters, behold, the sons of Jacob advanced upon them with 112 men, with a great and tremendous shouting. And when the kings saw the sons of Jacob advancing toward them, they were still more panic-struck, and they were inclined to retreat from before the sons of Jacob at first, and not to fight with them. But they did not retreat, saying, it would be a disgrace to us thus twice to retreat from before the Hebrews. And the sons of Jacob came near and advanced against all these kings and their armies, and they saw, and behold, it was a very mighty people, numerous as the sands of the sea. And the sons of Jacob came unto the Lord and said, help us, O Lord, help us and answer us, for we trust in thee, and let us not die by the hands of these uncircumcised men, who this day have come against us. And the sons of Jacob girt on their weapons of war, and they took in their hands each man his shield and his javelin, and they approached to battle. And Judah, the son of Jacob, ran first before his brethren, and 10 of his servants with him, and he went toward these kings. And Jashub, king of Tapnach, also came forth with his first with his army before Judah. And Judah saw Jashub and his army coming toward him. And Judah's wrath was kindled, and his anger burned within him, and he approached to battle, in which Judah ventured his life. And Jashub and all his army were advancing toward Judah, and he was riding upon a very strong and powerful horse. And Jashub was a very valiant man, and covered with iron and brass from head to foot. And whilst he was upon the horse, he shot arrows with both hands from before and behind, as was his manner in all his battles. And he never missed the place to which he aimed his arrows. And when Jashub came to fight with Judah, and was darting many arrows against Judah, the Lord bound the hand of Jashub, and all the arrows that he shot rebounded upon his own men. And notwithstanding this, Jashub kept advancing toward Judah to challenge him with the arrows, but the distance between them was about 30 cubits. And when Judah saw Jashub darting forth his arrows against him, he ran to him with his wrath-excited might. And Judah took up a large stone from the ground, and its weight was 60 shekels. And Judah ran toward Jashub, and with the stone struck him on his shield, that Jashub was stunned with the blow, and fell off from his horse to the ground. And the shield burst asunder out of the hand of Jashub, and through the force of the blow sprang to the distance of about 15 cubits, and the shield fell before the second camp. And the kings that came before, or came with Jashub, saw at a distance the strength of Judah, the sons of Jacob, and what he'd done to Jashub, and they were terribly afraid of Judah. And they assembled near Jashub's camp, seeing his confusion. And Judah drew his sword and smote 42 men of the camp of Jashub, and the whole of Jashub's camp fled before Judah, and no man stood against him. And they left Jashub and fled from him, and Jashub was still prostrate upon the ground. Jashub was still prostrate upon the ground. And Jashub, seeing that all the men of his camp had fled from him, hastened and rose up with terror against Judah, and stood upon his legs opposite Judah. And Jashub had to break.
Yep. All right, hold on, everybody. We'll be right back for a second.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com.
With commerce being monopolized by major corporations, we feel a responsibility to return to handmade goods and to support individuals in the community. Sacred Word Publishing wants to encourage truth seekers to support each other. And one of the best ways we can do that is through offering this centralized marketplace where everyone's homemade products can be easily accessed by our fellow members in the body of Christ. Would you be interested in offering your handcrafted items in our store? Email us at sacredwordpublishingllc@gmail.com. Support the truth-seeking community by going to www.swpmarket.com. Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures.
Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
All right, welcome back everybody for a second hour. As always, the show is just flying by. I'll turn it back over to you, brother, and once you're done, I've got something kind of interesting to share.
Okay, so I was skimming ahead during the break. There's like dozens of more pages to go.
Oh, really?
Not just for this chapter, but to get us caught up in Genesis, there's several more chapters. So, if you want, I can finish this chapter, and maybe if you wanted to say what you wanted, and then I could continue, or maybe we can alternate chapters. Alternate. If you want to pull up Josher, maybe we can alternate after you do your portion.
Sure.
There's quite a bit here. It's like another several chapters to get us caught up in Genesis. It's like Josher fills in such a huge amount of time with lots of details.
Right. I love it.
Yeah, it's great. It's definitely cool. So I'll just finish this chapter, and then whatever you wanted to share, we could do that, and then maybe we can tag team the other chapters if that's cool.
Okay, sure. Sounds good.
Okay. Let me go back to where we left off here. I think it was on verse 37. And Jeshub had a single combat with Judah, placing shield toward shield, and Jeshub's men all fled, for they were greatly afraid of Judah. And Jeshub took his spear in his hand to strike Judah upon his head, but Judah had quickly placed his shield to his head against Jeshub's spear, so that the shield of Judah received the blow from Jeshub's spear, and the shield was split in two. And when Judah saw that his shield was split, he hastily drew his sword and smote Jeshub at his ankles, and cut off his feet, that Jeshub fell upon the ground, and the spear fell from his hand. Dude. And Judah hastily picked up Jeshub's spear, with which he severed his head, and cast it next to his feet. Man, this is like an episode of Vikings or something here.
Right.
And when the sons of Jacob saw what Judah had done to Jeshub, they all ran into the ranks of the other kings, and the sons of Jacob fought with the army of Jeshub and the armies of the kings that were there. And the sons of Jacob caused 15,000 of their men to fall, and they smote them as if smiting at gourds. And the rest fled for their lives. And Judah was still standing by the body of Jeshub, and stripped Jeshub of his coat and mail. And Judah also took off the iron and brass that was about Jeshub. And behold, 9 men of the captains of Jeshub came along to fight against Judah. And Judah hastened and took up a stone from the ground, and with it smote one of them upon the head, and his skull was fractured, and the body also fell from the horse to the ground. And the 8 captains that remained, seeing the strength of Judah, were greatly afraid, and they fled. And Judah, with his 10 men, pursued them, and they overtook them and slew them. And the sons of Jacob were still smiting the armies of the kings, and they slew many of them. But those kings daringly kept their stand with their captains, and did not retreat from their places. And they exclaimed against those of their armies that fled from before the sons of Jacob, but none would listen to them, for they were afraid of their lives, lest they should die. And all the sons of Jacob, after having smitten the armies of the kings, returned and came before Judah. And Judah was still slaying the 8 captains of Jeshub, and stripping off their garments. Levi saw Elon. It's the first time I've ever seen that name outside of Elon Musk. Levi saw Elon, king of Gaash, advancing toward him with his 14 captains to smite him. But Levi did not know it for certain. And Elon with his captains approached nearer, and Levi looked back and saw the battle was given him in the rear. And Levi ran with 12 of his servants, and they went and slew Elon and his captains with the edge of the sword. So you covered a lot of this in the
Legends of the Jews.
Legends of the Jews, which apparently they got it from here, I guess. But, you know, we were discussing this last week, that, I mean, these guys are all like a bunch of Samsons out there, you know, with the jawbone, you just going to town. But we see that they went in with the prayer, you know, Father, you know, help us so that we don't get defeated by these uncircumcised men. Right. And it's clear, and this gives a lot of insight to me. Also, much later, when Joseph is sold into slavery, and they don't know when they go down there, that after Joseph is made second in charge, and the brothers don't recognize Joseph, and Joseph's messing with them, Judah gets all kind of in his face, and he's like, "Do you know who I am? Do you know what I've done? Do you know what I'm capable of doing?"
Right.
This is like the backstory for the attitude of Pharaoh during that deal.
Yeah, because I'm sure, you know, people spoke about it and talked about it, and it frightened them in the same manner that, you know, the Joshua and the Israelites, and the slaughter of Canaan and taking down the giants in that particular area. The stories were passed on and retold, and, you know, probably even songs and things like that were created in remembrance.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
So
well,
you had something?
Yeah. I was looking up what we were talking about in that word Yemen, which I found, and in this particular, it says that Yemen is springs, but I found something completely different, and it kind of came up to my attention. It says creatures from the book of Jasher found on a Mayan stela, and it depicts these creatures that are, I don't know if you can see it, but the bear-like, but anyways, I'll just read what's with it. It says the book of Jasher is an alternate narrative of the events that happened in the Old Testament or Torah. Some of the stories are rather odd and mysterious. One such story is about an encounter with strange beasts called Yemem. So here they said that, the beasts are the Yemen instead of the springs. They were described as small men or children with the heads of bears and long tails that came out from behind their shoulders. In an attempt to describe what was seen, there are descriptions from 2 or more creatures whose names remain a mystery, the Kephas and the Duchepathath. This story is told by a man named Anna, that these creatures rode off with his charge of donkeys. Apparently he was believable enough that the inhabitants of that land never returned to that area. Anna is mentioned in the book of Jasher as a man who lived in times of Esau, the elder twin brother of Jacob, who became the patriarch of the Israelites. Esau moved his family to the land of Seir, which he had conquered. His children married with the inhabitants. Anna is a grandson to both Esau and Seir the Horite, of who the land is named after. And then it shares the story that you read from. I'll skip that part. But then it says, Mount Seir is on the southern borders of where modern Israel and Jordan meet, just north of the Gulf of Aqaba, the eastern sea that borders the Sinai Peninsula, which is part of Egypt. The Gulf of Aqaba runs into the Red Sea and finally out through the Gulf of Aden to the northeastern Indian Ocean and Arabian Sea. So what are these creatures doing in a stela found in El Bal, Guatemala? The stela shows a bare-chested, non-muscled frame of a male. His bare head looks like a helmet. It even looks like an eye hole showing a smaller eye. Inside, this bear-shaped head covering is connected to an apparatus around his neck, which is connected to a tube-shaped object in a box of some kind. Is it a breathing apparatus? Could this tube be called a tail to someone who had just never seen a tube? It is missing the length to be considered a tail, but we are not given clear view of what is behind him except the legs of his victim tripping behind him. Down behind his left knee there is a tube shape, but it is cut up by the stela itself. Could this be part of that tail? Even stranger, his bear helmet looks like it is breathing out fire as he stands in dominance over another figure. The story from the book of Joshua is lacking in the way that it describes how these little bear-helmeted men traveled between the wilderness on the other side of the sea, then through the sea to where these donkeys were so quickly, and how their storm mesmerized the donkeys long enough to be mounted and stolen. Did they travel through the sea or air? Something is missing. Perhaps there's a clue in the stela. At the top left, it looks like 2 clouds that resemble serpents facing each other. There appears to be some kind of tiny man holding out or onto a handle connected to what looks like a decorated purse-type object. What is that object? There are so many mysteries about this stela. Currently, this stela is considered classical period, which was from 200 CE to 1000 CE. Esau was born around 2006 BC, which leaves a margin of 3,000 years. That's 3,000 years of possibilities. And so I'll just go back to the stela again.
Wow. So this time period that the stela is dated to is 3,000 years removed from the Joshua account.
Yeah. Well, of course, what they say about ages and
all that.
Yeah.
Take it with a grain of salt.
Right. But yeah, so people can look this up for themselves if they want to see it. It's creatures from the Book of Jasher found on a Mayan stela, and so I thought that was intriguing as well.
Yeah. Wow, that is very cool. Look at that.
Yeah, pretty crazy.
That's some wild stuff right there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You want me? I can read the next one if you want to read the chapter for that. Okay, I'll read chapter 38, and you can get situated for 39.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, Joshua 38. And Ehuri, king of Shiloh, came up to assist Elon, and he approached Jacob when Jacob drew his bow that was in his hand, and with an arrow struck Ehuri, which caused his death. And when Ehuri, king of Shiloh, was dead, the 4 remaining kings fled from their station with the rest of the captains, and they endeavored to retreat, saying, "We have no more strength with the Hebrews after their having killed the 3 kings and their captains who were more powerful than we are." And when the sons of Jacob saw that the remaining kings had removed from their station, they pursued them. And Jacob also came from the heap of Shechem, from the place where he was standing, and they went after the kings, and they approached them with their servants. And the kings and the captains and the rest of their armies, seeing that the sons of Jacob approached them, were afraid of their lives, and they fled till they reached the city of Chazar. And the sons of Jacob pursued them to the gate of the city of Chazar, and they smote a great smiting amongst the kings and their armies, about 4,000 men. And whilst they were smiting the army of the kings, Jacob was occupied with his bow, confining himself to smiting the kings, and he slew them all. And he slew Parathon, king of Chazar, at the gate of the city of Chazar, and he afterwards smote Susi, king of Sarton, and Laban, king of Beth Corin, and Shabir, king of Machnema, and he slew them all with arrows, an arrow to each of them, and they died. And the sons of Jacob, seeing that all the kings were dead, and that they were broken up and retreating, continued to carry on the battle with the armies of the kings opposite the gate of Chazar, and they still smote about 4,000 of their men. And 3 of the men of the servants of Jacob fell in that battle. And when Judah saw that 3 of his servants had died, it grieved him greatly, and his anger burned within him against the Amorites. And all the men that remained of the armies of the kings were greatly afraid of their lives, and they ran and broke the gate of the walls of the city of Chazar, and they all entered the city for safety. And they concealed themselves in the midst of the city of Chazar, for the city of Chazar was very large and extensive. And when all these armies had entered the city, the sons of Jacob ran after them to the city. And 4 mighty men, experienced in battle, went forth from the city and stood against the entrance of the city with drawn swords and spears in their hands. And they placed themselves opposite the sons of Jacob and would not suffer them to enter the city. And Naphtali ran and came between them, and with his sword smote 2 of them and cut off their heads at one stroke. And he turned to the other 2, and behold, they had fled. And he pursued them, overtook them, smote them, and slew them. And the sons of Jacob came to the city and saw, and behold, there was another wall to the city, and they sought for the gate of the wall and could not find it. And Judah sprang upon the top of the wall, and Simeon and Levi followed him, and they all 3 descended from the wall into the city. And Simeon and Levi slew all the men who ran for safety into the city, and also the inhabitants of the city with their wives and little ones, they slew with the edge of the sword, and the cries of the city ascended up to heaven. And Dan and Naphtali sprang upon the wall to see what caused the noise of lamentation, for the sons of Jacob felt anxious about their brothers, and they heard the inhabitants of the city speaking with weeping and supplication, saying, "Take all that we possess in the city and go away, only do not put us to death." And when Judah, Simeon, and Levi had ceased smiting the inhabitants of the city, they ascended the wall and called to Dan and Naphtali, who were upon the wall, and to the rest of their brothers. And Simeon and Levi informed them of the entrance into the city, and all the sons of Jacob came to fetch the spoil. And the sons of Jacob took the spoil of the city of Chazar, the flocks and herds and property, and they took all that could be captured, and went away that day from the city. And on the next day, the sons of Jacob went to Sarton, for they heard that the men of Sarton who had remained in the city were assembling to fight with them for having slain their king. And Sarton was a very high and fortified city, and it had a deep rampart surrounding the city. And the pillar of the rampart was about 50 cubits, and its breadth 40 cubits, and there was no place for a man to enter the city on account of the rampart. And the sons of Jacob saw the rampart of the city, and they sought an entrance in it, but could not find it. For the entrance to the city was at the rear, and every man that wished to come into the city came by that road and went around the whole city, and he afterward entered the city. And the sons of Jacob, seeing they could not find the way into the city, their anger was kindled greatly, and the inhabitants of the city, seeing that the sons of Jacob were coming to them, were greatly afraid of them, for they had heard of their strength and what they had done to Chazar. And the inhabitants of the city of Sarton could not go out toward the sons of Jacob after having assembled in the city to fight against them, lest they might thereby get into the city. But when they saw that they were coming toward them, they were greatly afraid of them, for they had heard of their strength and what they had done to Chazar. So the inhabitants of Sarton speedily took away the bridge of the road of the city and from its place before the sons of Jacob came, and they brought it into the city. And the sons of Jacob came and sought the way into the city and could not find it. And the inhabitants of the city went up to the top of the wall and saw, and behold, the sons of Jacob were seeing an entrance into the city. And the inhabitants of the city reproached the sons of Jacob from the top of the wall, and they cursed them. And the sons of Jacob heard the reproaches, and they were greatly incensed, and their anger burned within them. And the sons of Jacob were provoked at them, and they all rose and sprang over the rampart with the force of their strength, and through their might passed the 40 cubits breadth of the rampart. And when they had passed the rampart, they stood under the wall of the city, and they found all the gates of the city enclosed with iron doors. And the sons of Jacob came near to break open the doors of the gates of the city, and the inhabitants did not let them in. For from the top of the wall they were casting stones and arrows upon them. And the number of the people that were upon the wall was about 400 men. And when the sons of Jacob saw that the men of the city would not let them open the gates of the city, they sprang and ascended the top of the wall, and Judah went up first to the east part of the city. And Gad and Asher went up after him to the west corner of the city, and Simeon and Levi to the north, and Dan and Reuben to the south. And the men who were on the top of the wall, the inhabitants of the city, seeing that the sons of Jacob were coming up to them, they all fled from the wall, descending into the city, and concealed themselves in the midst of the city. And Issachar and Naphtali, that remained under the wall, approached and broke the gates of the city, and kindled a fire at the gates of the city, that the iron melted. And all the sons of Jacob came into the city, they and all their men, and they fought with the inhabitants of the city of Sarton, and smote them with the edge of the sword, and no man stood up before them. And about 200 men fled from the city, and they all went and hid themselves in a certain tower in the city. And Judah pursued them to the tower, and he broke down the tower, which fell upon the men, and they all died. And the sons of Jacob went up the road of the roof of that tower, and they saw, and behold, there was another strong and high tower at a distance in the city, and the top of it reached to heaven. And the sons of Jacob hastened and descended and went with all their men to that tower, and found it filled with about 300 men, women, and little ones. And the sons of Jacob smote a great smiting amongst those men in the tower, and they ran away and fled from them. And Simeon and Levi pursued them, when 12 mighty and valiant men came out to them from the place where they had concealed themselves. And those 12 men maintained a strong battle against Simeon and Levi, and Simeon and Levi could not prevail over them. And those valiant men broke the shields of Simeon and Levi. And one of them struck at Levi's head with his sword, when Levi hastily placed his hand to his head, for he was afraid of the sword. And the sword struck Levi's hand, and it wanted but little to the hand of Levi being cut off. Wow, that's pretty hardcore. Tremendous shriek, and was it
39.
39?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And Levi seized the sword of the valiant men in his hand and took it forcibly from the man, and with it he struck the head of the powerful man, and he severed his head. And 11 men approached the fight with Levi, and they saw that one of them was killed, and the sons of Jacob fought, but the sons of Jacob could not prevail over them, for those men were very powerful. And the sons of Jacob, seeing that they could not prevail over them, Simeon gave a loud and tremendous shriek, and the 11 powerful men were stunned at the voice of Simeon's shrieking. And Judah at a distance knew the voice of Simeon shouting, and Naphtali and Judah ran with their shields to Simeon and Levi, and found them fighting with those powerful men, unable to prevail over them, as their shields were broken. Naphtali saw that the shields of Simeon and Levi were broken, and he took 2 shields from his servants and brought them to Simeon and Levi. And Simeon, Levi, and Judah on that day fought all 3 against the 11 mighty men until the time of sunset, but they could not prevail over them. And this was told unto Jacob, and he was sorely grieved, and he prayed unto the Lord, and he said, and he and Naphtali, his son, went against these mighty men. And Jacob approached and drew his bow, and came nigh unto the mighty men, and slew 3 of their men with the bow. And the remaining 8 turned back, and behold, a war against them in the front and rear, and they were greatly afraid of their lives, and could not stand before the sons of Jacob, and they fled from before them. And in their fight they met Dan and Asher coming toward them, and they suddenly fell upon them and fought with them, and slew 2 of them. And Judah and his brothers pursued them, and smote the remainder of them, and slew them. And the sons of Jacob returned and walked about the city, searching if they could find any men. And they found about 30 or 20 young men in a cave in the city. And Gad and Asher smote them all. And Dan and Naphtali lighted upon the rest of the men who had fled and escaped from the second tower, and they smote them all. And the sons of Jacob smote all the inhabitants of the city of Sarton, but the women and little ones they left in the city, and did not slay them. And all the inhabitants of the city of Sarton were powerful men. One of them would pursue 1,000, and 2 of them would not flee from 10,000 of the rest of men. And the sons of Jacob slew all the inhabitants of the city of Sarton with the edge of the sword, that no man stood against them, and they left the women in the city. And the sons of Jacob took all the spoil of the city, and captured what they desired, and they took flocks and herds and property from the city. And the sons of Jacob did unto Sarton and its inhabitants as they had done to Khazar and its inhabitants, and they returned and went away. And that probably takes us pretty much right into the break here. Maybe if you want to take over on chapter 39.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll just comment. But definitely Jasher goes into great detail on a lot of what, like we don't even hear about this war against the Ninevites. I don't believe in the regular Genesis narrative. There's a lot of elaboration.
Yeah, that's completely skipped, and I don't even think we've gotten to Isaac's death yet. So this is
right
between the death of, because all in chapter, I think it was 35, maybe, where we left off of Genesis, we get Rachel's death and Isaac's death. So it would appear, at least, I don't remember seeing Isaac's death in here in Joshua yet, that this was in between those events.
Right. Yeah, and also in the book of Jasher, we get great elaboration on the wars between the children of Jacob and Esau, which is, the continuation of the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent as it plays out. And so very important, I believe. All right, we'll be right back, everyone, for our final segment.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased, as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com. Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
With commerce being monopolized by major corporations, we feel a responsibility to return to handmade goods and to support individuals in the community. Sacred Word Publishing wants to encourage truth seekers to support each other. And one of the best ways we can do that is through offering this centralized marketplace where everyone's homemade products can be easily accessed by our fellow members in the body of Christ. Would you be interested in offering your handcrafted items in our store? Email us at sacredwordpublishingllc@gmail.com. Support the truth-seeking community by going to www.swpmarket.com. Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures.
All right, welcome back, everybody, for a final segment. Rob, did you want to comment or say anything about the previous chapters?
If I did, I don't remember. There's nothing other than quite a battle.
Yeah. All right, we'll continue with chapter 39.
Cool.
And when the sons of Jacob went from the city of Sarton, they had gone about 200 cubits when they met the inhabitants of Tapnach coming toward them. For they went out to fight with them because they had smitten the king of Tapnach and all his men. So all that remained in the city of Tapnach came out to fight with the sons of Jacob. And they thought to retake from them the booty and the spoil which they had captured from Khazar, and Sartan. And the rest of the men of Tapnach fought with the sons of Jacob in that place, and the sons of Jacob smote them. And they fled before them, and they pursued them to the city of Arbelam, and they all fell before the sons of Jacob. And the sons of Jacob returned and came to Tapnach to take away the spoil of Tapnach. And when they came to Tapnach, they heard that the people of Arbelam had gone out to meet them to save the spoil of their brethren. And the sons of Jacob left 10 of their men in Tapnach to plunder the city, and they went out toward the people of Arbelam. And the men of Arbelam went out with their wives to fight with the sons of Jacob, for their wives were experienced in battle. And they went out about 400 men and women. And all the sons of Jacob shouted with a loud voice, and they all ran towards the inhabitants of Arbelam, and with a great and tremendous voice. And the inhabitants of Arbelam heard the noise of the shouting of the sons of Jacob, and the roaring like the noise of lions, and like the roaring of the sea and its waves. And fear and terror possessed their hearts on account of the sons of Jacob, and they were terribly afraid of them. And they retreated and fled before them into the city, and the sons of Jacob pursued them to the gate of the city, and they came upon them in the city. And the sons of Jacob fought with them in the city, and all their women were engaged in slinging against the sons of Jacob. And the combat was very severe amongst them the whole of that day till evening. And the sons of Jacob could not prevail over them, and the sons of Jacob had almost perished in that battle. And the sons of Jacob cried unto the Lord, and greatly gained strength toward evening. And the sons of Jacob smote all the inhabitants of Arbelam by the edge of the sword, men, women, and little ones. And also the remainder of the people who had fled from Sartan. And the sons of Jacob smote them in Arbelam, and the sons of Jacob did unto Arbelan and Tapnach as they had done to Khazar and Sartan. And when the women saw that all the men were dead, they went upon the roofs of the city, and smote the sons of Jacob by showering down stones like rain. And the sons of Jacob hastened and came into the city, and seized all the women, and smote them with the edge of the sword. And the sons of Jacob captured all the spoil, and the booty, flocks and herds and cattle. And the sons of Jacob did unto Machayanma as they had done to Tapnach, to Khazar, and to Shiloh. And they turned from there and went away. And on the 5th day the sons of Jacob heard that the people of Gash had gathered against them to battle. There had been 14 captains in the city of Gash, and the sons of Jacob had slain them all in the first battle. And the sons of Jacob that day girt on their weapons of war, and they marched to battle against the inhabitants of Gash. And in Gash there was a strong and mighty people, of the people of the Amorites. And Gash was the strongest and best fortified city of all the cities of the Amorites, and it had 3 walls. And the sons of Jacob came to Gash, and they found the gates of the city locked, and about 500 men standing at the top of the outermost wall, and a people numerous as the sand upon the seashore were in ambush for the sons of Jacob from without the city at the rear thereof. And the sons of Jacob approached to open the gates of the city, and whilst they were drawing nigh, behold, those who were in ambush at the rear of the city came forth from their place and surrounded the sons of Jacob. And the sons of Jacob were enclosed between the people of Gash, and the battle was both to the front and the rear. And all the men that were upon the wall were casting from the wall upon them arrows and stones. And Judah, seeing that the men of Gash were getting too heavy for them, gave a most piercing and tremendous shriek. And all the men of Gash were terrified at the voice of Judah's cry. And men fell from the wall at his powerful shriek. And all those that were from without and within the city were greatly afraid of their lives. And the sons of Jacob still came nigh to break the doors of the city, when the men of Gash threw stones and arrows upon them from the top of the wall, and made them flee from the gate. And the sons of Jacob returned against the men of Gash, who were with them from without the city, and they smote them terribly, as striking against gourds, and they could not stand against the sons of Jacob, for fright and terror had seized them at the shriek of Judah. And the sons of Jacob slew all those men who were without the city, and the sons of Jacob still drew nigh to effect an entrance into the city, and to fight under the city walls. But they could not, for all the inhabitants of Gash, who remained in the city, had surrounded the walls of Gash in every direction, so that the sons of Jacob were unable to approach the city to fight with them. And the sons of Jacob came nigh to one corner to fight under the wall. The inhabitants of Gash threw arrows and stones upon them like showers of rain, and they fled from under the wall. And the people of Gash, who were upon the wall, seeing that the sons of Jacob could not prevail over them, from under the wall reproached the sons of Jacob in these words, saying, What is the matter with you in the battle that you cannot prevail? Can you then do unto the mighty city of Gash and its inhabitants as you did to the cities of the Amorites that were not so powerful? Surely to those weak ones amongst us you did those things, and slew them in the entrance of the city, for they had no strength when they were terrified at the sound of your shouting. And will you now then be able to fight in this place? Surely here you will all die, and we will avenge the cause of those cities that you have laid waste. And the inhabitants of Gash greatly reproached the sons of Jacob, and reviled them with their gods, and continued to cast arrows and stones upon them from the wall. And Judah and his brothers heard the words of the inhabitants of Gash, and their anger was greatly roused. And Judah was jealous of his God in this matter. And he called out and said, O Lord, help, send help to us and our brothers. And he ran at a distance with all his might, with his drawn sword in his hand. And he sprang from the earth, and by dint of his strength mounted the wall, and his sword fell from his hand. And Judah shouted upon the wall, and all the men that were upon the wall were terrified. And some of them fell from the wall into the city and died. And those who were yet upon the wall, when they saw Judah's strength, they were greatly afraid, and fled for their lives into the city for safety. And some were emboldened to fight with Judah upon the wall. And they came nigh to slay him when they saw there was no sword in Judah's hand. And they thought of casting him from the wall to his brothers. And 20 men of the city came up to assist them. And they surrounded Judah, and they all shouted over him, and approached him with drawn swords. And they terrified Judah. And Judah cried out to his brothers from the wall. And Jacob and his sons drew the bow from under the wall, and smote 3 of the men that were upon the top of the wall. And Judah continued to cry, and he exclaimed, O Lord, help us! O Lord, deliver us! And he cried out with a loud voice upon the wall, and the cry was heard at a great distance. And after this cry, he again repeated to shout. And all the men who surrounded Judah on the top of the wall were terrified. And they each threw his sword from his hand at the sound of Judah's shouting, and his tremor, and fled. And Judah took the swords which had fallen from their hands. And Judah fought with them, and slew 20 of their men upon the wall. And about 80 men and women still ascended the wall from the city, and they all surrounded Judah. And the Lord impressed the fear of Judah in their hearts, that they were unable to approach him. And Jacob and all who were with him drew the bow from under the wall, and they slew 10 men upon the wall. And they fell below the wall before Jacob, and his sons. And the people upon the wall, seeing the 20 of their men had fallen, they still ran toward Judah with drawn swords, but they could not approach him, for they were greatly terrified at Judah's strength. And one of their mighty men, whose name was Adarad, approached to strike Judah upon the head with his sword, when Judah hastily put his shield to his head, and the sword hit the shield, and it was split in two. And this mighty man, after he had struck Judah, ran for his life at the fear of Judah, and his feet slipped upon the wall, and he fell amongst the sons of Jacob, who were below the wall. And the sons of Jacob smote him and slew him. And Judah's head pained him from the blow of the powerful man, and Judah had nearly died from it. And Judah cried out upon the wall, owing to the pain produced by the blow. When Dan heard him, and his anger burned within him, and he also rose up and went at a distance and ran and sprang from the earth and mounted the wall with his wrath excited strength. And when Dan came upon the wall, near unto Judah, all the men upon the wall fled, who had stood against Judah, and they went up to the second wall, and they threw arrows and stones upon Dan and Judah from the second wall, and endeavored to drive them from the wall. And the arrows and stones struck Dan and Judah, and they had nearly been killed upon the wall. And wherever Dan and Judah fled from the wall, they were attacked with arrows and stones from the second wall. And Jacob and his sons were still at the entrance of the city below the first wall, and they were not able to draw their bow against the inhabitants of the city, as they could not be seen by them, being upon the second wall. And Dan and Judah, when they could no longer bear the stones and arrows that fell upon them from the second wall, they both sprang upon the second wall, near the people of the city. And when the people of the city who were upon the second wall saw that Dan and Judah had come to them upon the second wall, they all cried out and descended below between the walls. And Jacob and his sons heard the noise of the shouting from the people of the city, and they were still at the entrance of the city, and they were anxious about Dan and Judah, who were not seen by them, they being upon the second wall. And Naphtali went up with his wrath-excited might, and sprang upon the first wall to see what caused the noise of the shouting which they had heard in the city. And Issachar and Zebulun drew nigh to break the doors of the city, and they opened the gates of the city, and came into the city. And Naphtali lived from the first wall to the second, and came to assist his brothers. And the inhabitants of Gash, who were upon the wall, seeing that Naphtali was the third who had come up to assist his brothers, they all fled and descended into the city. And Jacob and all his sons and all their young men came into the city to them. And Judah and Dan and Naphtali descended from the wall into the city, and pursued the inhabitants of the city. And Simeon and Levi were from without the city, and knew not that the gate was opened. And they went up from there to the wall, and came down to their brothers into the city. And the inhabitants of the city had all descended into the city, and the sons of Jacob came to them in different directions. And the battle waged against them from the front and the rear, and the sons of Jacob smote them terribly, and slew about 20,000 of them, men and women. Not one of them could stand up against the sons of Jacob. And the blood flowed plentifully in the city, and it was like a brook of water. And the blood flowed like a brook to the outer part of the city, and reached the desert of Beth Corin. And the people of Beth Corin saw at a distance the blood flowing from the city of Gash. And about 70 men from amongst them ran to see the blood, and they came to the place where the blood was. And they followed the track of the blood, and came to the wall of the city of Gash. and they saw the blood issue from the city, and they heard the voice of crying from the inhabitants of Gash, for it ascended unto heaven, and the blood was continuing to flow abundantly like a brook of water. And all the sons of Jacob were still smiting the inhabitants of Gash, and were engaged in slaying them till evening, about 20,000 men and women. And the people of Corinth said, surely this is the work of the Hebrews, for they are still carrying on war in all the cities of the Amorites. And those people hastened and ran to Beth Corin, and each took his weapon of war. And they cried out to all the inhabitants of Beth Corin, who also girt on their weapons of war, to go and fight with the sons of Jacob. And when the sons of Jacob had done smiting the inhabitants of Gash, they walked about the city to strip all the slain. And coming in the innermost part of the city, and farther on, they met 3 very powerful men, and there was no sword in their hand. And the sons of Jacob came up to the place where they were, and the powerful men ran away. And one of them had taken Zebulun, who he saw was a young lad, and of short stature, and with his might dashed him to the ground. And Jacob ran to him with his sword, and Jacob smote him below his loins with the sword, and cut him in two, and the body fell upon Zebulun. And the second one approached and seized Jacob to fell him to the ground. And Jacob turned to him and shouted to him, while Simeon and Levi ran and smote him on the hips with the sword and felled him to the ground. And the powerful man rose up from the ground with wrath-excited might. And Judah came to him before he had gained his footing, and struck him upon the head with the sword, and his head was split, and he died. And the third powerful man, seeing that his companions were killed, ran from before the sons of Jacob. And the sons of Jacob pursued him in the city, and whilst the powerful man was fleeing, he found one of the swords of the inhabitants of the city, and he picked it up and turned to the sons of Jacob, and fought them with that sword. And the powerful man ran to Judah to strike him upon the head with the sword. And there was no shield in the hand of Judah. And whilst he was aiming to strike him, Naphtali hastily took his shield and put it to Judah's head. And the sword of the powerful man hit the shield of Naphtali, and Judah escaped the sword. And Simeon and Levi ran upon the powerful man with their swords, and struck at him forcibly with their swords. And the two swords entered the body of the powerful man, and divided it in two lengthwise. And the sons of Jacob smote the 3 mighty men at that time together with all the inhabitants of Gash, and the day was about to decline. And the sons of Jacob walked about Gash, and took all the spoil of the city. Even the little ones and women they did not suffer to live. And the sons of Jacob did unto Gash as they had done to Sartan and Shiloh.
Dang, dude.
That's a lot of slaughter, boy.
Yeah, I'm just gonna. I don't think I have time to go through chapter 40. Looks like that's
right.
a long chapter, and 41 we get to Isaac here. So,
okay, right on.
It does look like, at least at a quick glance, that this is taking place between the death of Rachel and the death of Isaac. It's quite a. I mean, the first thought that's coming to my head, well, 2 things are coming to my head. 1, I'm really tired, and 2, I'm really hungry. How are these guys doing this?
Right. I mean, nonstop. They've got to be worn out.
Seriously,
a lot of people.
That's a lot of smiting.
Yes, a lot, and a lot of mighty men too from each of these cities, and we're talking about the Amorites. These were giants. These were the hybrid, and
well, that's what it says. It struck them at the waist. That may have been like for them chest high.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yes. Right. Yeah, because they were of very much larger stature, and then also the fortifications of each of these cities were very formidable. All the cities were high walled and barricades, and this one with 3 different walls. They were able to retreat and have the higher ground and the upper hand, and it was a lot to overcome.
Yeah, I mean, this is really, it's like Lord of the Rings meets Vikings.
Right. Yeah, certainly it goes into a lot more detail than what we have just in the regular Genesis narrative.
Well, and it is so detailed too.
Yes.
That's one of the reasons why it tends to lend credibility to the story. Is, I mean, there's a lot of detail given here. It's not just, they went in and fought a battle and they took the spoils and but they never, at least not that I've seen so far, went back to the issue of Levi, who looks like he almost lost his hand.
Right. It'll be interesting to see if there's further elaboration at some point about that. Maybe at the end, that'll review kind of their the damage that they took, and kind of wounds and hurt that they had to then heal up from. Maybe.
Yeah, that would have been a rough time to get such a wound.
Right.
Try to recover from something like that, man. I mean, the way I read it, did it sound the same way to you? It sounded like it was like just hanging by a thread.
Hanging by a thread, yeah. That's the way I took it too. And certainly, if you lose one of your hands in a war like this, you're not going to be able to protect yourself with a shield, which it seems that they were.
They made use of shields.
Yeah, they most certainly did. As great protection, and if they didn't have a shield, they were at risk.
Yeah, I'm looking at chapter 40, verse 8, and it's. I mean, it says, "In all the inhabitants of the cities of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, and all the kings of Canaan, and also those who were on the other side of the Jordan, heard the noise of the shouting of that night." I mean, that's all giants, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And we see that it was because they were going up against this hybrid bloodline that they were ordered to smite every man, woman, and child. Right. And we see that in the different accounts of the killing all the inhabitants and putting them all to the sword.
Well, it's interesting because, it sounded like they were out and about doing their thing, everything's cool. They're mourning over his mother. And then they decide to go back to Shechem. And all of a sudden, okay, it's on.
Right.
I mean, they're just hey, for chapters. It was like they just wanted to go back to their former land that had now been rebuilt, and reoccupied during the time that they were away.
Yeah, and then one after the other, all the inhabitants just kept coming after them.
Some of these guys got to be pretty young, though. Well, I mean, Joseph. Yeah. We know we don't really see Joseph going out in this battle. Right. I don't remember seeing much of that because he's only 17.
Yeah.
When we get to him being sold into slavery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it even mentions here that Naphtali was a young lad, and
and
going against these.
I think it's Zebulun too, didn't it? Say one of the guys.
Yeah.
One of the
grabbed him and slammed him to the ground.
But he's still in the fight. So I mean.
Right.
Well, I mean,
they're doing what they can. Yeah.
Yeah. And if these are giants, man, that's just because it keeps saying mighty ones, and
right.
I know that's Gaborim in Hebrew, and that's an accurate translation, mighty one. But because I saw in Genesis. Well,
we're at break.
At a break. That's it.
We'll pick it up next week. God bless all.
All right, blessings.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this video and this broadcast. We appreciate all of you, and thank you for your patronage. Please do like and subscribe and share with your friends. God bless all of you in your seeking.